Hello and welcome. I'm Kamla. My guest today is the Indian ambassador to the US, Nirupama Menon Rao. This is part 2 of our interview. In part 1, Ambassador Rao talked about the opening of the US-India relationship and how it has evolved and how she uses technology, especially Twitter.
Today, the India-US relationship is a defining partnership, as President Obama spoke about it when he came to India in November 2 years ago. It's a defining partnership. It is a partnership that is very much rooted in the world of the 21st century. And why do I say that? It is because it is so multifaceted, this partnership today. It not only covers bilateral interaction, whether it is security or counterterrorism or leadership level dialogue or cooperation on energy, agriculture, education, science and technology, consular issues. You know, we have a dialogue that encompasses beyond the bilateral. It goes into regional issues. We talk about the situation in East Asia, the world of the Indian Ocean, what is happening in the Middle East, in Central Asia. We cooperate in the United Nations. So it's a relationship that is structured at so many levels and has grown far, far beyond anything we imagined in the mid-90s.
In part 2, she talks about her personal interests, music and poetry. She's the author of a book of poems called Rain Rising. Ambassador Rao joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1973. The language of communication reminds me that you're also a poet and you've published a book of poetry.
That's right.
How did you find the time to write a book of poetry in the midst of your diplomatic work?
Well, Kamla, I've been a student of literature in college, and I had always been fascinated by language, by words. And not words as empty concepts, because words often are laden with so much meaning, and you can interpret them in so many ways. And as a diplomat, the language of communication is so seminal, so central to what we do. And I found that my love of literature and what I do as a diplomat and the daily, tools of diplomacy, as it were, are so inextricably intertwined with literature and style as much as, of course, substance. So writing poetry, I felt, was relatively, relevant also to what I did. And the raw material, the inspiration for what I wrote in my poetry came from my experiences, came from my travels, my meetings with interesting people. And I've always been interested in reading and the arts and theatre.
Do you find time to read?
On long flights, especially the long flights that I take very often across the United States or back home to India. So I've always loved reading, especially as a child. I was a voracious reader. Unfortunately, I don't get enough time to read now, but I'm an internet junkie as much as I am a reader of, paper, as it were. So I straddle both these worlds.
Do you read through a Kindle or an iPad, or do you prefer good old-fashioned books?
Well, I'm an old-fashioned girl, as it were, so I like reading from an old-fashioned book. But I do use the iPad quite often, and I'm always glued to my iPad in a sense because I listen to podcasts.
When you were young, did you ever think that you would become a diplomat and you'd be traveling around the world, logging all these miles, living in big houses and meeting heads of state?
Well, I wanted to see the world from the time I was about 7 or 8. I was always trying to imagine what the rest of the world would look like. And since I was reading and, I would listen to my parents also talk about what was happening in the rest of the world and what we were seeing in the world around us. I was interested in traveling and understanding what all this was about. And I had an uncle of mine who was in the Foreign Service, and he would talk about his work in Japan. He was stationed there at that time, and I was absolutely hooked onto just, what the kind of profession he had, and it seemed to be a very interesting, exciting job to be doing. Of course, I didn't at that moment understand that you had to write a civil service examination to join. I was very young. But I'd made up my mind that if there was anything I wanted to do most, it would be to be a diplomat, to join the Indian Foreign Service at the age of 12. So
that was very young.
I was very, very young, very young. And but then I went on to college, and it wasn't foremost in my consciousness at that time. I, you know, concentrated on studies in college, and then went on to do my graduate degree in English literature. And then when I was 21, I was at an age ripe enough to take the examination, the civil service examination. So I took it while I was in Aurangabad in Maharashtra, which of course everybody knows today because it's one of the fastest growing cities in India. But at that time it was a very, very small town. And I studied in a university, Marathwada University, which was excellent in terms of the facilities it offered, but very far from Delhi, which was really the seat of the examination in many ways, Bombay, Madras, then Bombay, and Calcutta. So Aurangabad was very far removed from all that. So I went to Delhi and took the examination. And when I joined the Foreign Service and entered the academy, the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy of Administration, I didn't know a soul in my class, in my batch.
That must have felt
because
strange.
I was from a small town. I was literally your small town girl, you know, who was entering the civil service.
But you stood first in your exam.
I did. I was an All India first in the examination, but I didn't know a soul in my year. We call it batch. In America, they call it class. I didn't know a soul in my class, and so it was quite an experience, you know, going from Aurangabad and to Delhi basically, because you know you joined the Foreign Service, you went to the ministry. When you entered South Block for the first time, it was, you know,
the South Block, for those in America, what is South Block?
South Block is the seat of the Ministry of External Affairs. It's also where we have other ministries there, but the MEA, as it's called, is also located in South Block.
And External Affairs is Foreign Affairs.
External Affairs is Foreign Affairs.
Okay.
So for a young girl I was 22, it can be quite an experience, especially because I'd never lived in Delhi before.
So was it very heady, or was it very...
It was, in a sense, quite overwhelming, forbidding in a sense, because, you know, so huge and, you know, awe-inspiring. And today, when I think of it, you know, I spent most of my life, you know, in South Block and, of course, in our missions abroad. And it's the most familiar place on earth to me. I feel so much at home there. But, you know, when you enter it for the first time, it can be quite an experience.
And then you went to Austria. Your first posting was in
Austria. My first
Austria.
posting was Austria.
And which is where you seem to have reconnected with music, which is another of your abiding passions.
Yes, actually when I was in college in Bangalore, I, you know, used to sing, and we played the guitar, my sister and I. And we were very much into Western music, especially...
So you knew Elvis and...
Oh yes, and I was a great fan of Joan Baez.
Okay.
And I know that she's also from the West Coast of the United States.
Yes.
And I was a great fan of Joan Baez and would sing her songs.
Did you also listen to Bob Dylan?
I did. I did listen to Bob Dylan.
So America was there in the 60s
oh, yes.
and 70s?
It was very much there in the 60s and 70s. We watched the movies, the American movies, and although we didn't have internet and we didn't have, you know, all the technology at our fingertips that you have today, we were still quite well wired into what was happening outside.
Especially American music and
the
films.
American music and what was happening on American campuses, the protests against Vietnam and the whole, the outpouring of youthful sentiment and the Martin Luther King saga, the civil rights movement, all that, you know, we were witness to. I mean, sitting in India, but we knew what was happening. My father would bring home, Time and Newsweek and Life, and those days we had a magazine called the Saturday Evening Post also, which we would read. And we had access to a lot of information. You know, people talk of India as a closed economy at that time, but we were always open to information. We knew what was happening outside, especially we in the middle class, who had the privilege of good education and all, we had opportunities to read and to access information about the outside
So
world.
you knew about Norman Rockwell
Oh
painting
yes,
and everything.
oh yes, we did. Andrew Wyeth and Norman
All those
Rockwell.
paintings
yes.
and works you were very
And
familiar
when,
with.
as a young girl of 16, 17, I did know about that and about American history. We did a course in American literature when I was in Aurangabad, you know, sitting in Aurangabad, thousands of 10,000 miles away from the United States. We did a course in American literature where we studied Arthur Miller and Herman Melville and Tennessee Williams, and it was a full-fledged course which I enjoyed tremendously because we had a professor who had come back after Fulbright in Indiana, and he was our, you know, teacher for that course. And he
So in Vienna you discovered music and opera.
That's right.
And then you've also taken a course in opera singing?
I have learned a little of opera singing, and not because I can ever aspire to be an opera singer, because it is difficult work and it requires a lot of physical strength also. And
In what way when you say physical strength?
because in terms of your ability to project voice, to hold your breath, you know, just it requires a lot of physical strength also. And you find opera singers are usually, you know, they look very strong also, and they are very strong. And I learned that when I began to study just the technique of opera singing, that it takes a lot of physical strength also to be a good opera singer. But what I benefited from it was that I learned a lot about the physiology of human voice, how you project your voice even in public speaking, and how you do breath control, which is very much like our yogic pranayams. Very much. I mean, people don't understand that, but what you do in opera singing is so similar to doing the pranayams, you know, how you breathe from the diaphragm, regulate your breathing, you know, take deep breaths and hold it, and be able to graduate the use of that breath, which is what opera singing is all about, because you have long singing lines and you cannot afford to take your breath at the wrong place, because an expert will immediately point it out. You know, so you have to be able to hold your breath and take it at the right place, which is, I think, a very scientific concept, and requires a lot of almost meditative sort of focus. And
so do you watch a lot of operas then?
I do. I love watching opera, and I think I love watching the Indian classical arts also. I'm equally, you know, fond of both. The cultural expressions. And opera, you know, in many ways the themes of operas are very simple. They're about love and hate and death and
almost like Bollywood films.
They're almost like, yeah.
They're also over the top.
Yeah. But I like the sound, the spectacle. Maybe it's the Indian in me that likes it. I like the sound, the spectacle, the color, the in-your-face sort of, you know, expression. I like it.
Do you have any fondness for any particular operas? Italian or German?
I like both the German and the Italian operas. I like Puccini. I like the Puccini operas particularly. And next month in the Kennedy Center in Washington at the Metropolitan Opera in New York, there will be an Indian themed opera premiering. It's called Lala Rukh, and it's the story of an Indian princess. It's actually a French opera that was very, very popular. Some people call it the Sound of Music of the 19th century. It was so popular, but it sort of just wasn't performed after a certain point of time. So it's been revived by a company called the Opera Lafayette in Washington. And so it's coming to the stage, and I've been very privileged to be associated with it as one of the patrons for this. And it's just the story of the daughter of a Mughal king, emperor, actually the daughter of Emperor Aurangzeb, but it's not a story based on actual history. It's a fictional representation, but it's all about India, about the colors, the costumes, the sceneries of India, and including of Kashmir, because it's a story of the marriage procession of this princess from Delhi to Samarkand. And
in Central Asia.
Yes, it's fascinating, and the music is French. I mean, the composer was Félicien David. He based it on a poem by an Irish poet, Thomas Moore. So, but it's an Orientalist story, you know, Orientalism. But all the same, I think since it's an opera, it's very charming, and and it should attract a lot of interest, I believe, and therefore, you know, put the spotlight on India also. So I'm happy to be associated with it.
You also sing Broadway numbers?
I do. I am interested in both jazz and show tunes, as they call it in the US, Broadway. And I do, whenever I'm in New York, I like to watch Broadway. I like to take in a play or a musical theater.
This question comes from a viewer. How do you juggle your professional life, being a mother, and being married to a husband who was also in the administrative services, and he also had his career track and you had your career track, and you both have 2 kids?
Yes.
So how did you manage all of that?
37 years ago when we were married, it was a rather unconventional existence to be in 2 different places, one spouse working in India, one abroad. We didn't have, you know, we weren't able to speak on the phone even easily enough because we had only trunk calls those days, and you know, you had to place a call with an operator in Delhi who would connect to an operator in London who would connect to an operator in Vienna. So that was how difficult it was to communicate. So we just used the post, snail mail those days, to communicate, and it wasn't easy. It was not a conventional existence. But my husband encouraged me to pursue my career because he understood that it was important to me and that I wouldn't have been happy, you know, completely without it also. So without his support and encouragement, it would have been, you know, well nigh impossible for me to be where I am today. But today, when I look at married couples, there are many, many examples of spouses living apart, you know, commuter marriages, people living in different countries. So that's become more the nearer normal, let's say. Not completely normal still, but nearer the normal than it was in my time. But we've managed, I think we've managed to find that balance in what we've done and in our marriage. And it has worked, and our children have grown up in both India and abroad, and I think they're comfortable in both places.
Did they stay with you, or did they go to a boarding school?
No, they didn't go to a boarding school. They basically were with us. My older son spent more time in Delhi because I was posted in Delhi with my husband for a lengthier period of time. But my younger son has grown up in different capitals. You know, he's been everywhere I've gone, whether it's Washington, Peru, Lima that is, and Moscow, and Sri Lanka and Beijing. So he's been in all these places.
And what is the dinner table conversation when you have your children around? Do you ever talk about your travels, or do you talk about movies, films? What do you talk about?
Well, we're just like any family. I think, you know, we talk about what's happened that day, or who we've met, or issues that need to be discussed and sorted out in terms of, you know, what the children want in terms of advice, or asking them what they're doing. So it's a very normal sort of conversation when we have dinner together, which is not very often because we're all in so many different places. You know, my husband always refers to us as the nuclear family that has gone further nuclear. so, so it's the nucleus that has been further split. I think life is all about balance. I think we all learn that. I think it's just to create that kind of equipoise that we all need, you know, in daily existence. I think it's all an organic process, I believe. There's nothing that is preordained, I believe. I mean, I know in India we talk about fate and we talk about destiny. But I think you make your own destiny and you mold your own fate in many ways because of your attitudes, your personality, your perspectives.
Do they keep tabs on you via Twitter then?
No, I'm the only one in my family on Twitter. They're very conservative, I think, with the rest of the family, and they're all men, and I'm the only woman in the family, but I seem to be the most keyed into social media.
How did you get into Twitter?
I've always been interested in media, in communication. I'm fascinated by the whole business of communication and language of communication. So when the Libya crisis occurred in 2011 and we had thousands of Indians who had to be evacuated, and it was a huge operation, Safe Homecoming, that we launched. So at that time I felt that, you know, many people stranded inside Libya, in towns like Misrata and away from even Tripoli, the only way we could communicate with them was via Twitter. And so I got onto Twitter for that reason, because as Foreign Secretary I felt I was responsible for these people and I had to be able to tell them, you know, help is at hand, we are arranging this and that, this special flight or this ship, and our embassy will be doing this for you. And Twitter worked greatly. It helped greatly for me to communicate.
Public telegram service.
Exactly, a public telegram service, literally, a bush telegraph, you could call it.
Is that what you called it? Bush
no,
telegraph?
I didn't call it that,
okay.
but it was like a bush telegraph, literally, because, you know, this is the only way we could communicate. So that's how I got onto Twitter. And once I got onto it, I mean, I found that lots of people began to follow me, and they were interested in knowing what, you know, government had to say on this issue, or, you know, some problem had cropped up somewhere. They wanted a reaction from us. So it helped, I think, to place our point of view and put forward our perspective at the right time, you know, in real time, as it were. So I kept, and I said, that's what being a citizen diplomat is all about.
Have you influenced any other of your colleagues to embrace Twitter in the diplomatic service?
I have encouraged a number of my colleagues to also be on Twitter, and there are quite a number now who also are on social media. I think it's an enormously powerful tool, and you have to use it, of course, with a lot of thought, and you have to weigh your words carefully, because once you press the send or tweet button, you know, it's not possible to retract it. So,
Ambassador Rao, it's been a pleasure having you on this show. Thank you so much for your time.
thank you very much, Kamla.
Thank you for watching. We'll be back again with another show. Until then, goodbye.